Hey DIYers and companies out there looking to modify shipping containers. We're trying something new in this video. We have added 2D plans, a PDF that you can download in the description down below. Open that up, maybe follow along as you're watching this video and give me feedback. Do you like this idea? Should we be doing it on future videos? And are there dimensions or views that we're missing? We want your feedback, help us out there. In this video, you're really gonna learn how to insulate the floor properly inside of a shipping container. We're gonna frame the entire interior with a very new framing method. And then what's really cool is how we're gonna install our shelving inside of there. It's super heavy duty shelving, gives us 3 courses. And this thing here is a very secure office that would work very well for you preppers out there. You can actually close up the doors entirely and nobody would know that you'd have a supply cache or whatever in there. So let's get on with the video. Hope you learned something. We start off by installing the 2-inch rigid foam on the floor. We'll cut the foam to 7 foot 8 inches from the 8 foot lengths and we run them horizontally in the container and make sure we tape the seams. Here we're using a vinyl tape instead of a tuck tape, which is my fault because a lot of times the guys would use tuck tape in our shop on the outside of containers and it would always leave a sticky residue, so I threw all that stuff out. But in this instance, we needed it. With the plywood, we actually cut it to 7 foot 6 inches, which leaves an inch of foam exposed on either side. We used regular plywood here because we're going to be double layering our subfloor, and we figured it wouldn't be an issue, but we did notice some lippage between the non-tongue and groove plywood. So going forward, make sure you use tongue and groove at least on your first layer, even if you're planning on doing a subfloor on top of that before your finished floor covering. The back end of 40s has an 11-foot section. That's a gooseneck end of a container, and that's all metal. So instead of using our wood screws there, we actually have to pre-drill and use a metal screw with a countersunk head. And then we can continue with 3 or 3.5 inch deck screws and screw right down into the stock shipping container plywood flooring with all the rest of the sheets. We slowly work our way back, making sure that these butt joint ends are as tight as possible and trying to get rid of any of that lippage that we come across in this method. After we were finished with the first layer of 1/2 inch plywood, we moved on to the second layer of subfloor. We made sure that we did not railroad our seams between the foam, the first layer of subfloor, or this final layer. Here we're using the zip systems, but we figured overlapping our seams was going to give us our best chance at having a nice, smooth, solid floor in the end. So this worked wonderfully, and it also has that air and water seal that's directly applied right to this OSB sheeting here. The next step before we even started framing was to apply our first coat of our epoxy floor covering. We learned something here. The butyl sealant that we used to make sure that any of the seams were perfectly flat wasn't compatible with the epoxy floor coating. And so when we stepped over it, we could actually flake off the floor covering. So that was a big lesson. Whenever you're applying 2 coatings or a sealant and a coating, make sure that those 2 are compatible. That's what this channel is about. You guys learning from our mistakes. So here we're innovating again. This is a new way for us to strut frame shipping containers. This utilizes a bottom track and an upper track, and we've laser referenced where these strut channels go, and we're doing this so that we can keep these struts parallel to each other. We really struggled with the individual struts and the individual brackets, trying to get our wall systems to be vertically and parallel and not parallelograms, and so this is going to take care of that. But what this really has merit for is very durable, solid structures. This framing method, if you did every corrugation, it is a blast resistant method of framing. Once that's all tied into the exterior walls of the shipping container with our spray foam insulation, this thing is solid. This is probably the way that you want to frame a shipping container on the inside if you're ever planning on burying one. There's still lots of work to do on the outside. Make sure you're using concrete and waterproofing, but this is probably how you want to do it. And then it is extremely modular. Now you can bolt anything to the walls here. Any electrician or plumber can mount any type of either pipe or mechanical systems right to this strut channel. They are right at home. This is an awesome way to do things, but learning how much work this is, we actually came up with a way better way that I'm really excited to show you in future videos. So here William's getting started on the partition wall. You'll notice that this container does not have any doors or any windows. In the commercial and industrial sense, we call this a secure office where you're able to close up your shipping container doors, back your zoom boom up to the doors, and you really make sure that nobody's breaking into your office or your tool crib. So here we actually switched from our strut framing method back to a steel stud method, and that comes right up to our container wall flashing. This we drafted downwards about an inch from the strut strap down to the wall flashing, and that makes sure that any humidity, condensation, or whatever is actually going to drip out and away, land on the footer of the container doors, kind of similar to how you would tile a shower niche. On the walls, we make sure that our strut strapping is on the identical plane as our steel studs, so we can transition from steel stud to strut to steel stud to strut, and this new method that we're coming up with might be a hybrid of both. Steel studding is just like wood framing, except for you kind of piece it all together like Lego rather than air nailing everything together and carrying the wall in. If you've never used steel studs before, I'd highly suggest you try it because it's an awesome way to frame. You don't have to be professional, and you can kind of build it as you go and just solve one problem at a time, kind of like Will right here. With these steel studs, you'll always use a track at the top and the bottom, and then when you go around windows or doors, you use that same track. So across the top of the window or the door, you use the bottom track, so to speak, and across the bottom of the window, you'll use the top track, and then you can snap in vertical studs above or below. That's especially handy when you got really wide windows. One thing about steel studs is that the spray foam, as it cures, can actually push them out and bend and bow them a little bit. They're super straight when they come in the bundle, but they can flex a lot more than a wood stud will. So whether you're using stiffener bars or if you use your exterior sheeting to ensure that all of these studs are on the same plane before your spray foamer arrives, to really make sure that that wall remains nice and straight after it's all cured. Here, Wild Bill Will's using a Sawzall. We should be using our router here. And I also noticed that he doesn't have a lot of screws in the studs, so it's shaken. You'll notice afterwards that all the screws are there. You should have done that first, and that's really gonna help you router out all your windows. But that's a great way of sheeting. I think that's a pretty common knowledge method, is you just sheet right over top of your windows and doors and just cut them out afterwards.
Great success.
If you're using steel studs for interior walls, you can actually table saw some softwood lumber and stuff that inside of the stud. And then if you're needing to use a wood screw through your hinges, or you wanted to air nail it or something, you can actually hit some wood and not just go right into a steel stud. I don't think they did that here, but that's definitely something you can keep in mind if you're wanting a bit of extra rigidity right around your door frame. So here he is screwing it in afterwards, which is the wrong way of doing it. Another thing you can do is also add some butyl seal or caulking behind the plywood on all the studs, and that just really makes sure that it holds it all together. Then the screws are really only there until the adhesive or the sealant cures. So after you cut out your zip sheeting, you'll notice that that one edge is now exposed OSB, and Zip has awesome either stretchy tape or they got their seam tape, and both of them can work in taping off all of your windows and doors the same way that you would when you type R a building. You typically want to start on the bottom and work your way up. And so it's just like how water would drain. Do the bottom piece first, then the sides, then the top. I see William kind of did it in the wrong order. The last thing to do is install these container door flashing kits. We're actually going to be insulating the container doors, plus we're going to be insulating this partition wall. The only area on this container that's going to leak any sort of air and have air loss and heat loss is through this window and the door. And so if we can actually close up the container doors and have those insulated, this thing's going to cost pennies to heat overnight when nobody's in and out of it. There we go. So after Williams installed the window, he's going over the nailing flange again with the zip system. And that's really going to make sure that no water is going to penetrate through this if it somehow gets behind our car wash panels that we're going to be using on the outside of this. We're using a 20 by 60 vertical slider window and a 36-inch commercial door in this end wall. This is a nice size of window. If you really try to maximize every square inch of this end wall for window and door, it gets really hard to both trim around everything and install some sort of a wall covering. And also your framing just gets flimsy. There's another option of maybe going to a 24-inch wide window and something not so tall. And then some people will actually build a window shaker air conditioner right into this partition wall. I've also seen some people build a partition wall a couple feet back, and then that's actually where they set their generator. So when they open up their doors, they fire that up. It's still outside of their envelope, and you don't have to be lugging it in and outside of your shipping container every day, twice a day. So here it is. This is round 2 of this strut framing method with this baseboard and crown mold that I like to call it. It is a slightly different method than our previous version, and what we did here is we actually have the front lip. We've eliminated the J, the PVC J that's required for these PVC panels by just bringing this galvanized forward. We got a bunch of galv here anyway. Why not just continue that look? But what we did on a previous version is we didn't tell our spray foamers to tape that all off, and it ended up being a huge job having to chisel all that away. So this time around, we got a little bit smarter. On the sidewalls seemed to be the problem, where we now are protecting that down low and up high. And then one thing, we didn't really realize the issue was so bad at the top is because the interior ceiling plane is actually brought quite a bit further down on this container, and that allows us to actually get 2 inches of foam in there, and we could still put some mineral wool insulation with that flash and bat method of insulating. So that's gonna work great here. That would add a lot of R value in there, and it would also make this thing very soundproof. So I probably sound very echoey in here, and when you put mineral wool insulation here, it's like a recording studio inside of these things. It's so nice, and it's actually really weird on your ears. One other change here, you can see just behind my shadow or beside it, is this exterior junction box. We've actually installed the exterior junction box right through the shipping container. A lot of people don't have the ability to cut a circular hole. You don't have a knockout punch or something, so using an angle grinder with a zip disc is a lot easier actually to cut a rectangular hole. With these exterior junction boxes, we made some custom flanges that allow them to install just like our Big Air 45 vents. And what this does, and what we didn't do yet, is we can actually now knockout punch a circular hole for a 2-inch trade size PVC to come through here. And then when we spray foam, we can spray foam right up to that. And now we have this flawless vapor barrier all the way around. There are a few places where there's holes inside of this thing. And so what I'm gonna do is just take some sealed rivets and rivet them shut so that I don't get spray foam launching into the splitter box on the other side. There we go, so that's all sealed up now and ready for spray foam. So now that we're all finished up spray foaming, the next steps are to interior line this thing. So we're using a new brand of PVC wall panel. And what's amazing about this is these people were able to actually extrude them to the perfect length that we want. And now with this new framing system being perfect, we figure this is gonna work, but we're gonna find out right away here. So here they are. We've got them, I think they're 517 millimeters or something. This is a very specific size that we wanted these, and they're not probably gonna fit in all of them. They fit in that one. I think they don't fit here. Yeah, and they fit again. And so we wanted them to be long, and we can always cut them still. We can still go back to our old ways of cutting huge sheets, but this is gonna save us so much time. It's basically one full employee. And this is kind of the key to us mass producing these things ever, or if someone else was to take on our system and try to mass produce structures like this, you got to think of certain ways. They're already cutting these things at factory. Why would we redo all that? It's also just a really loud, obnoxious sound when you cut these things. So to get rid of that in our shop, mint. Another thing we can do here is actually pre-drill this hole into the strut strap. We know where these screws are gonna line up. So if we can save 3 to 5 seconds per screw times however many we put inside of this structure adds up. And that cost savings can be passed on to the customer. So this here is the theory of us getting rid of that J channel at the top and bottom. Here at the top, we're able to put these screws right into the panel, and we've deleted the parts, we've deleted a process. This idea isn't all roses though, because if you cut your panels a little bit too short, those screw holes might not fit. So we might need that flange to be longer instead of the J channel, and then it might look silly. Another thing is that spray foam problem that we observed. We ended up making a few hours of work cleaning out all those channels, where if that flange was further back and the foam behind it didn't matter, it was right into our wall assembly. I think that's the better option. So you'll probably see us go back to the PVC J channel in the top and bottom in future builds. So we got a new journeyman carpenter on staff here now. Brady is finishing up the end wall on both the outside and the inside, and you can tell this is a lot prettier than our previous work. He's put brick mold around that window, and then he's going to J up to that. That looks way better than before. He'll also put a jamb extension on the inside of the window, and then our Paylite or our PVC trim up, and then we J up to that on the inside. So we got the same interior and exterior wall covering. We're using these PVC car wash panels. They're amazing. They don't fade in the sun. It's a great chemical composition that seems to be UV resistant. So you don't have to worry that these white panels are going to be yellow in 2 months. They really have stood the test of time in all of our previous builds and other builds that we see around our city. And so you can trust that it isn't going to degrade from the UV rays over time sitting outside. So what Brady's noticing is that first piece of PVC panel is a couple inches away from the window. What you can do here is actually do a baseboard, like a Pay-Lite baseboard underneath there, and then get that first seam to line up to the underside of the window. But if you get up to the top and now you got yourself a problem, you got to consider that too. So really make sure that you line up your grout lines, so to speak, and ensure that you start with an intelligent height of a panel so that everything works out and you can snap everything in. It's always fun trimming around windows and doors, whether you do this out of tin or these types of panels, and it just takes a little bit of common sense and problem solving no matter which way you go. But I'm really liking the way that this is trimming up and finishing up, and seeing it in real life when it was all said and done, I can say that that is our best work so far as the carpentry goes. Good job, Brady. So with this build, we're going to show off the modularity of the interior. We're going to show you different utilizations of this structure for different commercial and industrial purposes. The first way that we retrofit this is to have just a lower bench. We actually have to build some tornado shelters, which will withstand very high winds, potentially flying debris, and provide 49 people a place to sit for a few hours as the storm passes. One thing that's very important with this type of structure is just past the door, we need some sort of a partition wall, a 90-degree turn that you got to go around so that in case the door flew open and there was a negative pressure, it wouldn't suck anyone out the door. And then we just need lower level benching. With this modular system, you can add any types of lights. You could have solar panels that are meant to fly away and some sort of a battery pack in there, which could either have some sort of a ventilation system, depressurization, air conditioning, who knows. But with the strut-lined interior, however you want, this gives you an idea with these lower level benches, a way to shove a bunch of people inside of a shipping container in case of emergency. And I promise you, you'll be way safer in here than most structures, especially structures without basements, if this thing is properly secured to the ground. We're getting smarter when we install these shelf brackets. We're now lasering in studs rather than trying to use spring nuts and bolts. This allows us to get everything perfect, and then we just got to lift up these shelf brackets and quickly spin the nut on. The next way we're going to retrofit this shipping container is into a change room. You probably wouldn't use 24-inch shelf brackets either at the top or the bottom. A 20-inch bench to sit on would be much better and give you a larger center hallway, and then you can get a lot of people inside of this structure in and out in a day, making sure that they have a nice dry place to change and keep their personal possessions as they're out working 8 to 12 hours in the field. And then the final way that we retrofit it is just 3 courses of shelving. This is a mod we do all the time. It's a portable warehouse. A lot of people want to actually implement a computerized portable inventory system on job sites, whether they're selling safety gear and charging anything that's consumed back to the customer, or if it's a tool crib. In this instance, we're actually going to have a warehouse attendant working up at the front, and then they're the only ones that are allowed inside of this shipping container. People will have to request safety gear or consumables. That person goes and picks it, keeps a beautiful log of their inventory, and it all feeds right back through internet to the customer's database. So with this white interior wall covering, it reflects the light so well once you got the lights on here, and it creates a nice, warm, welcoming workspace. It's not so bad to be working inside of a steel shipping container when it finishes out like this. So I'm really excited to develop this new framing method and show off how it works. What's really funny is it's already old news here at The Container Guy, and that's how we roll. We're constantly innovating, and I truly think we have found the ultimate way to frame shipping containers. We got this down to 2 components. There might be a few other accessory components, but it is something very simple, and I think it's going to be a framing method that applies to residential basements, mechanical rooms, all across the planet. It's going to take steel stud framing and 2x4 framing head to head, especially on interior framing methods. So stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and follow us along. We'll show that off once we got her sorted. Hope you learned something.